W-O-W. All you can say is wow. Welcome to IU Sports Sunday. Nick Rodecap with you. Following one of the craziest nights I have ever experienced in Bloomington. Indiana football is here. They are here to stay. And if you doubted them, ooh, man, you've got to be second-guessing yourself right now. Because what we saw Indiana do to Illinois in front of a record-breaking crowd at Merchants Bank Field at Memorial Stadium on Saturday, September 20th, 2025, will be remembered for a long, long time. That was the one thing that Indiana did not have, was a signature ranked win. Signature, see what I did there? Well, the Hoosiers got it last night. Belt to backside. That's what Indiana put on Illinois for 59 minutes and 50 seconds. Illinois had one good offensive play, and I'm going to give them credit for that, the Illini. A deep shot that turned into the visitors' only touchdown of the night. Came on a busted coverage. Outside of that, Illinois had nothing. Nothing. I had a feeling that Illinois was overrated, but my goodness. Old Dominion scored more points against Indiana than Illinois did. Illinois looked like it did not even belong in the same state as Indiana. It was unbelievable. I had the privilege, the opportunity to shoot last night's game for the Hoosier Network, an IU student media outlet, because I am a senior at Indiana. And I will tell you, it was deafening on the field. That is the loudest I have ever seen Memorial Stadium. Ever. Absolute pandemonium from the time IU warmed up to when third-string quarterback Grant Wilson took the final snap. It was complete insanity. And when Indiana beat Illinois last night, I was thinking to myself, this is going to be one of those nights where you remember where you were when this happened. And I think that's going to be the case for everybody. Whether you watched Indiana at home on NBC, or you were in the stadium, or you were at a restaurant, or you were tailgating, wherever you were, you're going to remember. I'm going to remember where I was. Flashback to 2022. Fall of 2022. What would end up being Tom Allen's penultimate season at Indiana. That was my freshman year. First game I ever went to as a student was Indiana, Illinois. That was the Connor Bazelak, Sean Shivers game-winning drive game. Admittedly, I did not stay for that entire game because even though it was a close game and Indiana had a shot at winning, and ultimately Indiana did win, that was the norm, was for students just to leave at halftime. I will tell you straight up, I didn't stay for the fourth quarter of that game because I, along with the friend that I attended the game with, we lived at Forest Residence Center. It's about a 30-minute walk from Memorial Stadium, and we decided we didn't want to get back too late. So we left. Let me tell you, nobody left yesterday. Now, there were some people that ended up on the concourse because of the rain, but everybody stayed. That was the first thing I noticed after halftime. Even though the score was lopsided, off the top of my head. I think it was 35-10 at halftime, and it was 35-10 at halftime. That was the first thing I noticed. I looked around as I was getting ready to shoot the second half, and I'm thinking, there is not a single empty seat in this stadium. A banner night for Indiana University football, a banner night for Curt Cignetti. And, oh, by the way, the sidelines were packed with recruits before last night's game. There were so many recruits who witnessed that. And a lot of people might have expected Indiana to win. Nobody expected this level of domination from either team, Illinois or Indiana. Absolutely incredible. That's the only way I can describe it. And if you were among the record-breaking crowd of 56,088 fans, the largest attendance in Memorial Stadium history, if you were among that crowd, then give yourself a hand, because Indiana suffocated Illinois. The Illini had nothing offensively. And I think reason 1A is Indiana's defensive line, and reason 1B is the Indiana crowd. Here's something. The college football gods decided a while ago that sacks count against sacks count against team rushing stats. That is not the case in the NFL, but it is in college. Take a guess at how many rushing yards Illinois had last night. The answer is 2. 2 net rushing yards. Indiana sacked Illinois quarterback Luke Altmaier, who people were concerned about being immobile. People were concerned that Illinois had a bad offensive line. Oh, those concerns came to fruition. Indiana sacked Luke Altmaier 7 times. 7 times. It felt like more than that, just from being on the field. It seemed like every time Altmaier dropped back to pass, except for the one busted coverage on Illinois' second drive, it seemed like Luke Altmaier was in trouble. Indiana made his night miserable. Speaking of miserable, Illinois head coach Brett Bielema, you'd see him on the sideline, also looking miserable. But I will flash back to a much darker time in IU football history when Brett Bielema was the head coach of Wisconsin. And those Badgers scored 83 points on Indiana. And to the IU fans who remember that, it was around 2010, 2011. The name Monty Ball rings a bell. He was on those Wisconsin teams. I think it was a year later, Wisconsin came to Bloomington and put up 60 on Indiana. I was at that game, if I remember correctly. My, at the time, 7-year-old brain tells me that was my first IU football fan experience, because I remember the Knothole Kids Club in the right end zone. The right, as in the south end zone from where we were sitting. So for those Indiana fans who remember Brett Bielema at Wisconsin running up the score on Indiana, that's got to feel extra sweet. I was a little bit too young to really have a good memory of those games, but there are plenty of IU football fans who suffered through games like that, getting embarrassed, being a doormat, and that's got to feel so good. So good. People who laughed at Curt Cignetti and said, he can't build anything in Indiana. Indiana sucks. I wonder what they're saying now. Because it's obvious. Indiana has staying power in the college football world. For the first 2 years that I was a student here, we did not care about football. We cared about it because it gave us an excuse to go out and tailgate and drink and do whatever. But it's just like, oh, how many days until basketball season? And then we just stopped caring about football. Now, man, this is unbelievable. And I have friends in the media school who graduated prior to this year. And they're saying, man, what I wouldn't pay to be in Bloomington right now, I would give anything to be back in Bloomington, especially as a student. Well, I was lucky enough to be here at the right time. And man, that's for just strictly for Indiana University. That kind of night, Indiana beating Illinois 63-10. Illinois, an AP top 10 team. Wow. If it's that easy to beat top 10 teams at home, Indiana should schedule those kinds of cupcakes more often. Because all anybody's ever had to say about Indiana is, oh, they haven't played anybody. They beat up on bad teams, and then they get their teeth kicked in by real teams. Curt Cignetti can't win big games. When things go sideways, Indiana's just going to tuck the tail between the legs and slink away unceremoniously. All those IU football fans, they're not going to know what hit them when Illinois comes to town. Well, I'll tell you what hit those IU fans was a wave of jubilation and excitement. Curt Cignetti has built something special. Seemingly like that, at the snap of a finger in Bloomington. 2 years ago, Indiana football didn't name a starting quarterback for its season opener against Ohio State because the coaching staff thought it was a competitive advantage. Indiana played 2 quarterbacks in that game. Neither one of them led a touchdown drive. Ohio State won that game in which its quarterback Kyle McCord struggled. Indiana's defense was good, but the offense couldn't move the ball. And you knew it was another bad season of Indiana football. 2 years later, Indiana takes on a top 10 team in prime time and puts the nation on notice. This Indiana team might be better than last year's team. And I thought last year's team was pretty darn good. I think this Indiana team is better, even with the absence of Lee Beebe, who is out for the year with a knee injury at running back. Indiana's leading rusher last night was Lee Beebe's de facto replacement, Kobe Martin. That is dangerous. Dangerous for Indiana. You're telling me you have 4 bona fide first-string running backs? Oh, by the way, Indiana rushed for 300 yards again. 4 straight games doing that. Is that good? Because I was told that Indiana was only going to do that against bad teams. Maybe Illinois sucks. Didn't look like a ranked team last night, I'll tell you that much, which most people with a pulse would have realized that Illinois was overranked. Not overrated. They were overrated, but that's kind of an umbrella term. That's a term that's used more often than it should be, I think, to describe a whole host of college football teams. Illinois was overranked. I didn't think they were a top 10 team. But I remember saying on this show and probably the Hoosier Network's podcast, Pack the Rock as well, the higher Illinois is ranked, the better it looks if Indiana wins. And that's exactly what it was last night. One of the largest margins of victory ever by any team facing a top 10 team. The most points scored against an AP top 10 team by a Big Ten team. That's what Indiana did last night. We are going to talk all about Indiana's dominant win over number 9 Illinois for the next couple of hours here on IU Sports Sunday. A historic night, not just for IU football, but for Indiana University. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rodecap with you on the day after one of the biggest nights in IU football history. Indiana wallops Illinois 63-10. Now, what does this mean for the big picture? Well, it gives Indiana a clear path back to the college football playoff. Take care of business against the teams that you are supposed to beat. And I don't know if you even have to win against Oregon or Penn State. I think you got to keep it close. But if you take care of business, if you win one of those games against either Oregon or Penn State, and you take care of business against, in order, Iowa, Michigan State, UCLA, Wisconsin, and Purdue, you're in. You are in the college football playoff. I know it's only week 4. We have a long way to go. The season doesn't end for over 2 months, the regular season. But Indiana is sitting pretty right now. Putting the nation on notice, led offensively by the Cuban Missile, Fernando Mendoza. 2 incompletions on the night, 5 touchdowns. Is that good? I think that's good. Mendoza, 21 of 23 for 267 yards and 5 touchdowns. Indiana, the rushing attack, phenomenal per usual. If you're going to average 300 rushing yards a game, then it's going to be pretty easy to move the ball across the board. Indiana, 328 rushing yards to Illinois' 312 net rushing yards to Illinois' net 2. Fernando Mendoza did take a couple of sacks, so that's the negatives factoring into the net yardage. So Indiana, 312 rushing yards. Illinois had 2 net rushing yards. Kobe Martin, Lee Beebe Jr.'s replacement, led the way. 12 rushes for 107 yards and 2 TDs. He and Kalon Black both averaged 8.9 yards per carry. Indiana as a team averaged 6.4 yards per carry to Illinois' average gain of 0.1 yards per carry. No, that's not a misprint. No, that's not a typo. Those are the kinds of numbers that spell out utter domination. An Illinois linebacker whose name slips my mind, and I want to attribute this great quote to the right player. But Illinois' 247 Sports has locked the attribution behind a paywall. One of the Illinois players said after the game, "We've just got to eat this blank sandwich. Just got to eat this blank sandwich." I can't repeat that full quote, but suffice it to say, there was no mincing words among the Illinois side either. They know what this means. Illinois has been exposed as fraudulent, which is kind of what we all thought they were. What is it? They are what we thought they were. Illinois, not let off the hook, but just so puzzling why Illinois was even ranked in the top 10. Curt Cignetti told us after the game that he thought Indiana's defensive line could wallop Illinois' offensive line. Now, I'm paraphrasing a little bit here. But he thought that Indiana's defensive line had a very big physical advantage on Illinois' offensive line. He thought Indiana could impose its will. And boy, was he right. His exact quote, "I thought our defensive line could whip their offensive line." And we did. Incredible. Cignetti continued, "We broke their will and just pounded them." That's exactly what happened. And Sig wanted to give another soundbite, wanted to talk and strut because nobody thought Indiana could do this. He thought about saying something. Somebody asked him something along the lines of, how does it feel to silence the critics? What does this game say about Indiana football? What kind of statement does this make? Cignetti said, I don't control the narratives. I don't control the critics. He said, you guys control that, the media. And he turned to the strategic communications personnel, specifically Jeff Kegg, looked at him and said, I want to, but I'm not going to. They didn't put that in the transcript, but he said it. Got a chuckle out of everyone in the room. And I think that's kind of the biggest difference between this year and last year. Curt Cignetti being a lot more measured when talking to the media and letting Indiana's play make all the statements. Because Indiana didn't even need Fernando Mendoza to play the fourth quarter. Alberto Mendoza didn't even play the entire fourth quarter. The Hoosiers had their third-string quarterback on the field as the clock hit 0 in a Big Ten game. Grant Wilson. How many times does that happen? Illinois also took Luke Altmaier out prior to its final offensive series. They knew the writing was on the wall, did the Illini. But this level of domination, Indiana has to get flowers from all parties now, because you beat a top 10 team. Now, was that top 10 team overrated? Maybe. Overranked? Definitely. Whatever the case, you have to give Indiana credit. There is no more beating around the bush. And to be clear, I was not one of the people who detracted from Indiana last year and said, oh, Indiana's only good because they play bad teams. Because of the way Indiana was beating those teams. Putting a whooping on a Nebraska team that a lot of people were high on. Physically dominating Washington without your starting quarterback. Winning a defensive battle against a Michigan team that was as loaded on the defensive side of the ball as any team Indiana faced all year. That showed that it wasn't a fluke last year. But then Indiana got waxed by Ohio State and then got waxed by Notre Dame. People said Cignetti's a fraud. Now, what ended up happening last year is that Indiana happened to face the two undisputed best teams in college football. And those great teams beat a good team. Didn't mean Indiana was bad. It just meant Indiana had room to improve. But I think any IU football fan under the sun would have taken an 11-win season last year, no questions asked. And my speculation was, okay, Indiana is trending in the right direction after the non-conference slate, but can the Hoosiers rise to the occasion on a big stage? Because you could say Nebraska, Washington, Michigan last year. Shoot, even UCLA. That was a big stage. That was also a nationally televised game. But doing it against a team that so many people were high on, that makes a different kind of statement. What Indiana was able to do against number 9 Illinois last night, winning 63-10. Indiana shut out Illinois in the second half. Outscored them 28-0. 28-0 in the second half. That is how you break a team. And oh, by the way, USC is going to be in Champaign next weekend. Trojans looking like a very solid team as well. This season could go south for Illinois quickly. Indiana finally heads on the road. The Hoosiers will be in Iowa City. I will be in Iowa City next week. And that's really the final unknown now about this team. Can they do it on the road? That is my only, I'm not going to say concern, but that's my only question mark, is can Indiana do something like what it did to Illinois, but in a hostile environment? And sure, Iowa is not looking like it'll be a contender for the Big Ten title, the likes of Oregon and Penn State, and Ohio State, of course. But Kinnick Stadium is a very difficult place to play. And that place is going to be rocking next week. If Indiana gets out of there with another decisive win, then I think you are looking at a team that could win the Big Ten title. I think that is how good this Indiana team can be. That's the ceiling. ESPN's FPI agrees. The FPI, Football Power Index, can be flawed at times, but it points to, I think, some bigger trends to watch out for. Number one, Indiana is now up to number 6 in the ESPN FPI. The Hoosiers moved up 10 spots after last night's win. That is the biggest rise of any team in the top 30. So the computers like it. Indiana has a 14.8% chance to win the Big Ten. That's pretty good. 14.8% to win the Big Ten. USC, Ohio State, and Oregon are the only teams with a higher percentage chance to win the conference. Oregon at nearly 26%, Ohio State at 23.5%, and USC at 15.5%. Indiana's projected win-loss total right now is 10.4. That's 6th best in the entire country. Shout out Memphis, by the way. Memphis now 4-0 after beating Arkansas yesterday. Memphis has a projected win-loss total of 10.8. There's your group of 5 playoff team. It could also be North Texas. Both of those teams out of the American, so there's a pretty good chance that the American Conference Championship game is going to decide the group of 5 playoff representative. As for the playoff, as far as Indiana is concerned, 6th best odds there. A 60.5% chance per ESPN's FPI. Or sorry, not 60.5, I apologize. 57.4% chance to make the CFP. This is week 4. Indiana has a 14% chance to make the national championship game right now. That is 5th best in the entire country. Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, and Ole Miss are higher. And here's the big one. Indiana, the 5th best percentage chance of winning the national championship per ESPN's FPI, 7.5%. The computers like it. Indiana is here to stay. Indiana should be ranked in the top 10 later on today. Anything less is unacceptable. And here's why. Because the national media was ranting and raving about Illinois. College Game Day, in their infinite wisdom, the majority of the crew picked Illinois. The only ones who didn't were Reese Davis and Pat McAfee. Good on you guys. All we heard about for the entire week was how, Illinois beat the snot out of Duke, which, by the way, they didn't. Duke shot themselves in the foot over and over in that game. And that was the thing Curt Cignetti said about Indiana's physical domination, breaking Illinois' will, especially Indiana's defensive line, bending and breaking Illinois' offensive line repeatedly. Cignetti said the same thing happened in the Duke game. The difference is Duke turned the ball over 5 times, and Indiana didn't. All we heard all week, and really since the end of last season, was how, Indiana might beat up on cupcakes, but they're never going to beat a good team. They haven't beaten any ranked teams. But if you're going to use those rankings to justify Indiana's lack of success, then they should also be used to measure Indiana's success, right? Because what I can totally see happening is the national media moving the goalposts. Illinois was down 3 defensive backs, and they had another one ejected for targeting. Illinois was on the road. Well, Indiana, I don't know what are they going to say? What narrative are they going to try to spin? I genuinely don't know. I could see later on in the season if Illinois ends up being terrible. That Illinois team wasn't actually that good. Was Illinois not good? Or was Indiana just that dominant? I think Indiana was just that dominant. I think you could have thrown the undisputed best team in the country. I don't know which team that is. It might be Oregon. I wonder if Indiana and Oregon play each other this year. Wait a minute, they do. Good. I think Indiana's going to keep that game close in Eugene. I think you could potentially see a similar kind of game to what Oregon and Ohio State played at Autzen Stadium last year. Not what happened at the Rose Bowl. Don't ask Oregon what happened at the Rose Bowl. I think you could see a very close game between Indiana and Oregon. I'll tell you what, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun when Indiana goes out to Autzen Stadium. Because the national media is going to try to move the goalposts again. They're probably going to talk about Illinois' depleted secondary, which is a depleted secondary the reason why Illinois gave up 312 rushing yards? Is an injured defense the reason why Illinois gave up 7 sacks? Is an injured defense the reason why D'Angelo Pons got the crowd going with a punt block touchdown? Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure the injuries are the reason why Illinois gave up 63 points while not scoring at all in the second half. There should be no goalpost moving. This was a statement win. And Indiana football is not going anywhere, folks. Whether you like it or not, Curt Cignetti's Hoosiers are here to stay. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rodecap with you. This is fun. Indiana should beat the snot out of Big Ten teams more often. That's what I say. Hoosiers 63-10 over Illinois last night. And I would expect, doesn't mean it's going to happen because the AP does some really stinky stuff, but I would expect Indiana to be in the top 10. That's what happens if you wallop a top 10 team, I would think. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, AP voters. But we'll see. I would hope that the number one lesson from this game for all of you folks who judge college football teams exclusively off the AP poll and put so much stock in AP rankings and yada, yada, yada. The AP poll is a load of malarkey. That's what I say. And I know I'm saying, well, Indiana beat a top 10 team. Yeah, because Illinois was ranked in the top 10. Doesn't mean Illinois is one of the 10 best teams in the country. Because if Illinois truly was the 9th best team in the country and Indiana beat them that handily, then Indiana's the best team in the nation. I think Indiana has that ceiling. I was talking to one of my fellow student reporters before the game. This is an Indiana team that if the cards fall right, could potentially win the Big Ten and make a run in the college football playoff. I seriously think that is the ceiling for this team. Based on what I've seen, the way that they have imposed their will on a Big Ten team like Illinois, that is what I think Indiana can do. This is a team that definitely has the potential to make it back to the college football playoff. But this is also a team that could very easily be playing in Lucas Oil Stadium in December. Big Ten title game. That is very possible. The way that Indiana broke Illinois, didn't flinch after that busted assignment on defense, just got back at it. Moving the ball methodically through the air and on the ground. The efficiency of Indiana's offense, insane. It just seems like Illinois' defense couldn't get off the field. The Hoosiers pretty much did whatever they wanted to offensively. And on the defensive side as well. I mean, Luke Altmaier very rarely had a clean pocket to throw from yesterday. The home field advantage for Indiana is huge. When that crowd gets loud, I'm telling you, it is deafening. If you're on the field, you can't hear anything. You cannot hear anything. And it's a snowball effect. D'Angelo Pons blocks a punt, recovers it, takes it to the house for a touchdown. The crowd goes crazy. It gets loud. Illinois gets out of rhythm. And then from there, the cycle repeats. And then on the other side, and Aiden Fisher talked about this, the crowd was huge for Indiana because it made it, and Fernando Mendoza said this as well, it made it so hard for Illinois to do anything. And when the players are talking about the crowd making the opponent's life difficult, you know the fans did their part. And Indiana now does not play a home game for nearly a month. So we're going to have to wait a long time to see that Memorial Stadium effect again. Between now and then, you've got Iowa, a bye week, and Oregon. Michigan State is the next home game. So I think Indiana might get a taste of how the other half lives when they go to Kinnick Stadium. But I'll tell you what, I'll take Indiana against any team in the country. Yes, any team. Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, anybody. I think Indiana could hang with them. That is what last night showed to me, making a statement on a national stage. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rodecap with you. Bloomington loves winning. They love it. People were tailgating all day yesterday. And, I mean, the ticket prices were insane. People were excited about IU football. D'Angelo Pons' dad, Angelo Pons, said he felt a blowout from the parking lot. Which, what are next week's lottery numbers, Mr. Pons? For no particular reason. Just curious. I think that if the national media tries to tell you that Indiana still doesn't belong or that Illinois was injured and that's the only reason why Indiana won, then anybody who says that should not be listened to about anything related to college football. Two things can be true. Illinois was overranked because, again, they didn't look good against Duke. And the offensive line was a turnstile last week against Western Michigan. So you knew Illinois had weaknesses. Probably not the makings of a top 10 team. Both things can be true. Illinois was overranked, and Indiana was underranked. Indiana should be in the top 10 if we're going based on the AP voters' methodology here. It is clear, by all accounts, Indiana is a Big Ten contender. Because what good Big Ten teams are supposed to do, great Big Ten teams are supposed to do, against bad Big Ten teams, is exactly what Indiana did to Illinois yesterday. There is no universe where anybody should be able to subtract from Indiana's success yesterday or try to discredit it. Now, what ESPN talking heads like Heather Dinich are probably going to do, because this is what they've done in the past, Dinich did this last week, saying simultaneously that Georgia Tech had more work to do because its biggest win was against a team that was 1-2 after last week, now 1-3 in Clemson, while simultaneously saying that LSU is legit because one of their statement wins came against that same team that is now 1-3, Clemson. I could see a scenario where ESPN tries to do a similar thing to Indiana, trying to discredit the Hoosiers like they did to Georgia Tech. I'd say don't even give them the time of day. Because great teams are supposed to make lesser teams look like that. Illinois looked like an FCS team. That offensive line was a turnstile all night. That should scare every other team on Indiana's schedule because it doesn't look like there's an offensive line that can stop Indiana right now. That is seriously dangerous. And that should give Indiana fans confidence going into those hostile road environments at Iowa, Oregon, and Penn State. Because your defense is going to have to set the tone. Going to have to take the crowd out of the game early. That's what you're going to have to do. Maybe it's another big special teams play, like D'Angelo Pons blocking a punt and returning it for a touchdown. Those are the kinds of plays that program-shaping players make. Those are the kinds of guys that can elevate you to, dare I say, Big Ten championship contender, college football playoff contender level. Indiana, I'm serious when I say, Indiana could make the Big Ten championship game. It could happen based on what I saw last night. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you. Said it before, but man, that was fun. As an IU student, I'm a senior, and seeing the jump that IU football has taken from my freshman year to now is surreal. It really is. I can't believe it. It doesn't feel real. Being on the field at Memorial Stadium shooting last night's game, the crowd being so loud, I was thinking, man, I probably should have worn some earplugs. I never thought I would have experienced that at an IU home game. Unbelievable. And it's one of the plus sides of this new era of college sports as far as the transfer portal and NIL go. Elijah Surratt talked about how this team is made up of a lot of guys who were either under-recruited or done wrong at previous stops, coming here kind of as not the island of misfit toys, but kind of a group of guys that, like Surratt said, were overlooked, under-recruited. People didn't think maybe that they had what it took, but they're showing exactly what they're made of. And it's also a testament to Cignetti's ability to surround himself from the coaching staff side with the right people. The coordinators, the assistants, the strength and conditioning coach, Derek Owings. I mean, you got everybody in there firing on all cylinders. At least if last night is any indication, a 63-10 win over Illinois. By the way, if you want the sights and sounds as I saw them through the lens of my camera, the recap up on my Twitter, at Nick Rotacap, NickRodecap. Shot the game for the Hoosier Network. And just unbelievable. The defensive coordinator, Bryant Haynes. Offensive coordinator, Mike Shanahan. Quarterbacks coach, Chandler Whitmer. Countless others as well. All of those guys, their impacts absolutely huge. Huge. And Cignetti talking about Fernando Mendoza, saying that he had work to do when he got here. While he's got the physical side, and he's had the physical side from his days at Cal. His height, he's 6'5". Cignetti saying Mendoza, a whippy, strong arm, accurate, and we've seen that mobility as well. The biggest thing that Cignetti said Mendoza needed to work on when he got to Indiana was staying in the pocket, dropping back, going through his progressions, and being a bit more patient. Remember at Cal, Mendoza took a ton of sacks. He didn't have a great offensive line. But Cignetti talked about Mendoza last night, saying he will do everything he can to be the best he can be. He wants to be great. And here's the best part. He's made great progress in the last couple of weeks. Fernando Mendoza has thrown 3 incompletions in Indiana's last 2 games. He was 19 of 20 against Indiana State and 21 of 23 last night. And he has not played the entirety of the second half in either of those games, has Fernando Mendoza. He didn't play the fourth quarter last night. Fernando Mendoza this season, 76 of 99 for 975 yards, 14 touchdowns, and no interceptions. He's averaging 244 passing yards per game. But the kicker is he hasn't played a full game yet. Except for, I think, Old Dominion. I think he played the entire game against Old Dominion. So he's played 1 full game. But Alberto Mendoza and Grant Wilson have been on the field in the fourth quarters of the last 3 games. So we haven't seen Fernando Mendoza at his best for 4 quarters yet. That is scary. That is scary to think about. Because Mendoza and Cignetti, everybody talked about it after week 1. Nobody was pleased with that game. While Mendoza did play the entire game, it was clear he wasn't yet settled in. He and his receivers were not on the same page, and he was the first one to talk about that, about how he missed a lot of throws. I think he's his own worst critic in that respect because, he even talked about it last night. He said, there were a couple incompletions that I didn't like. Well, he only had 2 incompletions in the entire game. He wants to be perfect. And I think that drive, that tenacity is exactly what you're looking for in a quarterback. That's a guy who's going to play on Sundays. I think if Fernando Mendoza keeps playing the way he has to start this season, he keeps spinning the football like he did, especially last night. That throw to E.J. Williams in the back of the end zone, that was incredible. Because he got it over the linebacker's head and got it to where if E.J. Williams didn't catch it, nobody was going to catch it. Fernando Mendoza will play on Sunday in the NFL. There is no doubt in my mind. But Mendoza thinks he's still got more in the tank as far as his ceiling of success. He wants to be perfect. And that kind of, like I said, that kind of tenacity, that kind of work ethic, combined with those physical tools, that guy's a leader. That guy is a born leader. And the fact that Curt Cignetti was able to get him in the transfer portal, I think Mendoza is better than Curtis Rourke. I don't think that's exactly a hot take anymore. Now, do bear in mind, Curtis Rourke played all of last season on a torn ACL, and nobody knew until after the fact. And he still had one of the best seasons by any quarterback in IU football history. Fernando Mendoza could have a better season than Rourke did. This is a guy who is top 5 nationally in Heisman odds. I think he's at plus 1,300 now. He wasn't on anybody's radar on a national scale before the season. Now, he was on Indiana fans' radars because IU fans knew that this is what Fernando Mendoza was capable of. But on a national scale, nobody was thinking Fernando Mendoza had a chance to be in the Heisman conversation. Nobody was talking about him. Maybe it's because he played for Indiana, because he's playing for Indiana, and people think, oh, well, Indiana's bad. Indiana doesn't deserve any credit. What are they going to say now? And I would be cautious of the switch up that a lot of people are going to make about Indiana. To those of you who were saying going into this game that Indiana didn't have a chance and Indiana only beats up on cupcakes and they can't beat good teams and Illinois is going to come in and do all this, yada, yada, yada. All that nonsense. Stay on that side. Stay on that side. If you were thinking, oh, well, Indiana dominated Indiana State, dominated Kennesaw State, they're not going to do that against a Big Ten team like Illinois. Well, you're right. They scored more points against Illinois than they did against Kennesaw State. So stay on that side. Keep doubting Indiana at your own peril. Because I'll tell you what, man. After last night, they don't have a weakness. Except for maybe the secondary. That's the one weakness for Indiana. Missed assignments on defense, especially in the secondary. It happened against Kennesaw State and Indiana State. It's just that those offenses didn't take advantage of them. It happened against Illinois, and that was Illinois' only touchdown. Indiana scored 56 of the final 59 points in that game last night. That should terrify every one of Indiana's remaining opponents. If I'm an Iowa fan and I'm going to Kinnick Stadium in 6 days, which, by the way, I'm really excited to go there because it seems like a really cool place to watch a game. If I'm an Iowa fan, I am going to be screaming my lungs out, trying to make that stadium as loud as I can, knowing full well that it might not matter. That I might wake up on Sunday morning with a raspy voice and nothing to show for it. Because while I will give Iowa credit, because Iowa is obviously a decent enough team, I'm not going to take that away from them. because they seem like a much better team than we've seen in the past, especially when it comes to, I don't know, completing a forward pass. Iowa's up to 31st in the FPI. Indiana up to number 6, the biggest riser of any team in the top 40. But Iowa fans, this is not Rutgers that you're going to face. Indiana has a defense. I'll give credit to Ethan Kaliakmanis, the Rutgers quarterback. He's a very talented quarterback. There's no doubt about that. But not only is Iowa going to have to contend with a very talented quarterback, you're going to have to contend with talent at the 21 other positions between offense and defense. And oh, by the way, Indiana's blocked a punt in every single game so far. That is another thing to watch out for. Special teams. I mean, that could be a real game breaker for Indiana going forward. And I wish I had the stats in front of me. I'll have to find them. But I've got to imagine that if Indiana doesn't lead the nation in punt blocks, got to be in the top 5. Some of the advanced analytics talk about things like success rate, expected points added, or EPA per play. I bet Indiana's special teams EPA is among the best in the country. Because that D'Angelo Pons punt block touchdown last night, that was the play that really got the crowd going. That was the first big play. And it was deafening in Memorial Stadium. So Indiana, I would expect them to take more risks when it comes to blocking punts, because you saw firsthand how that flips a game in an instant. And then Indiana went on to break Illinois' will. This is a team that looks very complete in all 3 phases. And I know all 3 phases, that's coach speak. Offense, defense, special teams. But it's true. The special teams creates defense. Good returns on special teams create offense. Indiana's defense sacking Luke Altmaier 7 times forces Illinois to punt from bad spots on the field, which in turn sets up good field position, which lends itself to more success on offense. It's a cycle. It's like a snowball. It's going down a hill. It's picking up steam. It's adding to itself. It's getting bigger, which in turn makes it roll faster, which in turn makes it pick up more snow. It's a self-fulfilling cycle of the best kind. And the one question mark I have is, can Indiana take this on the road? I think this Iowa game next week, or I guess in 6 days' time, has the potential to be a lot like the Michigan State game was last year. Rowdy environment of just over 60,000. Iowa might get off to a fast start. Fans might start talking, and then Indiana finds its rhythm. I could see that happening, because that's what happened at Michigan State last year. Michigan State goes up 10-0, the student section's chanting overrated, and then Indiana scores 47 straight points. I think something similar could happen. Now, the one thing that worries me about Iowa, it's not their passing game. Fernando Mendoza has nearly twice as many passing yards as Iowa quarterback Mark Gronowski, and Mendoza hasn't even played a full game since week 1. The one thing that worries me about the Iowa Hawkeyes is Caden Wetjen, their return specialist. Wetjen, not one of their leading receivers, not one of their leading rushers, although he is listed as a wide receiver. But he got that Rutgers game started with a 100-yard kickoff return touchdown. Those kinds of special teams plays, we just talked about it with Indiana, they can set the tone for an entire game. That is the one unnerving thing. But everything else, it's there for the taking, man. This is an Indiana team that can win 11 games again. 22 wins over 2 seasons. Goodness gracious. Goodness gracious. You know how many wins Indiana had in the final 2 years of the Tom Allen era? It was a lot less than 22, I can tell you that. A lot less than 22. I don't think Indiana won 22 games over the final 4 years. From 21 to 20, or I guess that would be 3 years in the Tom Allen era. 2 wins, 3 wins, 4 wins. Not in that order. But off the top of my head, I think Indiana won 9 games in Tom Allen's final 3 years. So to go from that to 22 wins over the course of 2 seasons, Indiana's ceiling, I think, is... I'm not even going to say the ceiling is 11 wins. I think the ceiling for Indiana is 12 wins. Based on how Indiana played last night and how Indiana is trending, I think Indiana could go undefeated. The toughest game is going to be Oregon. But I trust Curt Cignetti in Happy Valley coaching against James Franklin. Because James Franklin has kind of established Penn State as the perennial little brother of the Big Ten. Oh, yeah, Penn State's going to be good. They're never going to be great. They'll win games. They won't win big games. I point to Ohio State last year. I point to the Big Ten championship game. I point to 2023 when Penn State almost lost to Indiana in State College. That's why I think Indiana could go into Penn State and win. There's a lot of time between now and then. And we'll know about Indiana on the road after Iowa this coming week. But this Indiana team, man, this team is better than last year. They're going to be just as special. Hope you join us for the ride. Because if you haven't hopped on yet, there's still time. There's still time. But man, this rise, this meteoric rise under Curt Cignetti, there's nothing like it in college football. Who's going to be this year's Indiana? A lot of people said Illinois. Well, I think this year's Indiana is Indiana. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rodecap with you after Indiana's 63-10 walloping of Illinois. And I got news. Remember how I said that certain talking heads at ESPN would discredit Indiana or refuse to give the Hoosiers the flowers that they so obviously deserve? Well, it's already happening. It's already happening. Who else but IU alum Heather Dinich? Who, what is her deal, man? What is her deal? I don't get it, man. You would think for somebody who graduated from IU, she would do a little bit more to defend her alma mater. Especially because ESPN has so many shills who blindly follow the SEC and think that that conference is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Heather Dinich put Indiana projected at 11th in the CFP field. 11th. Are you kidding me? Indiana was 10th last year. That's absurd. That's absurd. She put Miami in the top spot. She put Miami in the top spot because the selection committee considers the intangibles that accompany a rivalry game and would acknowledge the difficulty of Miami's win over Florida, even though Florida is struggling this year. Indiana-Illinois is a rivalry, no? It is. It is. Not to the same level of Miami-Florida. I'll give her that. The intangibles, guys. The intangibles somehow outweigh Indiana beating a rival at home by 53 points in a conference game. What? She also says that Texas Tech could get a boost in the eyes of the CFP committee because Texas Tech won on the road, whereas Indiana won at home. Are you kidding me? First of all, Texas Tech That was one of the football games of all time that they played against Utah. But Heather Dinich says if the Hoosiers are a playoff team for the second straight season, they will have earned it with a more difficult schedule as they still have to face Oregon and Penn State both on the road. If IU doesn't win the Big Ten title, it probably needs to at least split with those opponents to win a debate with another contender for an at-large bid. Counterpoint, no. I think as long as you keep Penn State and Oregon close, you show the committee that you can compete in hostile environments, you're fine. ESPN loves quality losses, don't they? All we heard about last year was how 9-3 SEC teams, Alabama and Ole Miss in particular, there was even an argument for South Carolina, deserved a playoff spot over a team like Indiana because they had quality losses. So now you're going to turn around and tell me that Indiana can't take advantage of those quality losses? If you're going to shill against one conference or for another, at least try to hide it. Don't tell me about the intangibles. Tell me about what's happened on the field. That should be the number one determining factor. Not, what was it that didn't show up in the box score? No, Indiana killed Illinois yesterday. Indiana looked like a CFP lock, not an 11th seed. You got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. Guess who's right above Indiana in Heather Dinich's playoff projection? Tennessee, a team with what Heather Dinich calls a quality loss. Quote, the committee isn't going to penalize Tennessee for its 44-41 overtime loss to Georgia. A quality loss. That's what that is. Obviously, that means more than Indiana winning 63-10. Oh, by the way, Tennessee lost that game at home. Tennessee lost that game at home. Oregon's only at number 8. The teams above Oregon, number 7, Oklahoma, number 6, Texas A&M, number 5, LSU, which, by the way, hey, Heather Dinich, one of LSU's signature wins is against a team that's now 1-3. Or do we only use that to discredit Georgia Tech? Because Georgia Tech isn't supposed to belong, whereas LSU is supposed to belong because of narratives that you and your fellow colleagues at ESPN covering college football manufactured to make your media contract with the SEC look better. Now, ESPN also has the ACC's media rights, but sometimes I think that they forget other conferences besides the SEC exist. LSU at 5. Florida State at 4. Georgia at 3. Ohio State number 2. And Miami number 1 in the projected top 12. Insane. Insane to think, LSU has good wins against Clemson and Florida. Florida sucks. DJ Lagway threw 5 picks in that game against LSU, and LSU still only scored 20 points. I think LSU is massively overrated. You played close games against Clemson and Florida. I'll give you that Clemson is a hostile environment, and you came out of there with a win. But Clemson is awful, man. Clemson is awful. Florida is terrible. DJ Lagway threw 5 picks, and you only won the game by 10. Are you kidding me? But LSU's at 5. Tennessee's above Indiana because of a quality loss. And they're still trying to make the argument that Indiana hasn't played anybody. If Indiana hasn't played anybody, then why did the majority of the supposed experts on College Game Day pick Illinois to beat Indiana? Which I'll admit, I said Illinois would win 31-27. That felt like a reasonable prediction. Boy, was I wrong. I am not an expert when it comes to college football analysis. I never played a down of tackle football in my life, and I will be the first to tell you that relative to my knowledge about baseball, which comes from me being immersed in the game as a player and as a media member, my knowledge about college football is less impressive. But I'm not going out there trying to tell people that my evaluation of teams is gospel and should be taken as such. I'm not the one flip-flopping my narratives depending on which conference a team represents. ESPN. And that is why, again, I want you to take whatever you hear from the national media about Indiana with a grain of salt. Because a lot of them refused to give Indiana any credit last year. Any credit at all. Oh, yeah, they didn't beat a ranked team. Technically, Nebraska was 25th in the coaches poll, and Indiana beat them 56-7. Also, Nebraska had been ranked prior to that game. Not in the immediate week leading up to it, but earlier in that season, Nebraska was ranked. Michigan was ranked earlier in the season. Michigan was not ranked by the time Indiana played them, but they were ranked. Illinois, ranked when Indiana beats them. If Illinois ends up having a stinker of a season, Indiana broke them. That is what you're going to look at this game as in 2 months from now. That's what you're going to see from this game in retrospect if Illinois ends up only winning 5 or 6 games. People are going to say Curt Cignetti broke Illinois. And they're going to be absolutely right. They are going to be absolutely correct. Illinois is now on the outside looking in the CFP. This was a team that a lot of people had as a dark horse, getting an at-large bid maybe. Illinois needs to beat USC and probably Ohio State as well to even have a shot. To even have a shot. Man. Indiana made a statement last night. And don't let anybody tell you differently. Until proven otherwise, Indiana is a top 10 team. No more beating around the bush. You beat Illinois by that much. I don't care if it was at home, on the road, on the moon, in Guantanamo Bay, in my backyard. You beat Illinois by that much anywhere. Doesn't matter who's on the field. I don't care that Illinois' secondary was injured. Indiana dominated that game on fronts well beyond just the passing game. I'm sure, like I said before, I'm sure the injured secondary was the reason you gave up 312 rushing yards. I'm sure the injured secondary was the reason you gave up 7 sacks. I'm sure. No. This was a clinic that Indiana put on in front of a record-breaking crowd of over 56,000 people. And I'm excited to head out to Kinnick Stadium and cover Indiana, Iowa this weekend. That's going to be fun. Indiana just needs a statement on the road. And then there's nothing to nitpick from them anymore. Isn't that crazy? Winning solves everything. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotocap with you. It wasn't just a good night for Indiana football. It was also a good night for Indiana football alumni. Well, not alumni, but Indiana football members of the past, shall we say. Here's a sentence that would have sounded categorically insane 2 years ago. Bill Belichick had no answers for Taven Jackson. Yeah, that happened. That happened. UCF beat North Carolina 34-9, and none other than Center Grove's finest, Taven Jackson, led the way for UCF. The Knights quarterback, 25 of 32 through the air for 223 yards, a passing touchdown. He was also UCF's leading rusher, 10 carries, 66 yards, and he added a TD on the ground as well. 34-9 UCF over UNC. Bill Belichick couldn't stop former Indiana quarterback Taven Jackson. Oh, man. You know, for a guy who exerted as much control over his public image and his entire operation as Bill Belichick did with the New England Patriots, his fall, I'm not going to say fall from grace, but I don't even know how to describe it. The absolute dud, there we go, that he is putting up at UNC right now, man, how do you think he feels? Because not only is he finding out that coaching college football is maybe a little bit harder than he thought, but he's got a girlfriend who's, 3 years older than me? I'm 21. I'll be 22 in a couple months. But he's got a girlfriend nagging him and seemingly controlling his every move to contend with as well. Man, should have just stayed retired, Bill. I know the check's probably nice. And Raleigh-Durham, that area of the country, the Triangle, Chapel Hill, cool part of the country. I lived there a couple summers ago when I was interning in Cary. But is it worth it? Because you're tarnishing your legacy, Bill. Taven Jackson made you look silly. You kidding me? Taven Jackson, who basically left Indiana because he didn't have a place. Showed flashes, sure, but it was clear that he was not part of Indiana's plans. An Indiana cast-off beat Bill Belichick. I never thought I would say that. Never in a million years. There are some good things to come out of this wacky era of college football, though. Man. Good night all around for IU football alumni. Let's see what Brendan Sorsby was up to. Because he's been having some success at Cincinnati with the Bearcats. Cincinnati had a bye week. Bearcats, a close loss to Nebraska week 1, but Sorsby and Scott Satterfield's Bearcats will be back in action next week against Kansas. But man, I'll tell you what. This has been such a cool experience covering IU football. It's my second year doing it for IU Student Media, the Hoosier Network. And this kind of feels like the morning after the UCLA game last year, where Indiana, coincidentally enough, that game was also on NBC in primetime. Coincidentally enough, that game was around this time last year. It was 53 weeks ago today. So a year plus a week. That was kind of the game where people realized last year, Indiana UCLA, which, by the way, I wonder what Deshaun Foster's up to. Oh, that's right. He got fired. The UCLA game was the game that kind of put Indiana on the map as a team to watch. It was clear that although UCLA was not good, Indiana was echelons above the Bruins. That's kind of what last night felt like. Illinois might be good. We don't know. Certainly not a first-half team. They're much better in the second half. Problem is, Indiana did not give them a chance to even sniff a comeback in the second half. Shut them out. Indiana scored 56 of the final 59 points. That's domination. Illinois might be good, might be decent. Maybe they put up a fight against USC. I don't know. Tell you what, Indiana fans should root for Illinois the rest of the season, because the more Illinois wins from here on out, the better this win looks. If Illinois ends up winning 9 or 10 games, whew, Indiana beating them 63-10 is going to look really, really good. But this game last night felt like UCLA last year. Last night we're thinking, okay, Indiana's first real test, big audience, big stage. Difference is this was in front of a deafening crowd at Memorial Stadium. And holy cow, did they show out. So you're looking at now an Indiana team that is on the map once again. Welcome back to the Spotlight, Indiana. One of my fellow student media members, Ian Plaskoff, wrote a column with that title, so I'm citing my sources there. Indiana back in the spotlight. And that's really, really cool. Putting this university on the map once again. Beyond basketball. Can you imagine if IU basketball is good this year too? I think Bloomington might explode. But I'm happy to be along for the ride. It's a privilege to get to cover a team like this. Happen to get very lucky with the timing, and it's incredible to watch them represent my university in this way. And I hope that it's only up from here for IU football because, again, based on what I've seen, this is a team that can contend for the Big Ten title. And beyond that, who knows, man? Who knows? But Curt Cignetti and Indiana football, they're coming for you, whether you like it or not. Iowa, they're going to have their hands full prepping for this coming Saturday. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rodecap with you. Have we ever had a time where IU football and the Colts have both been good at the same time? Outside of 2020. Okay, 2019, no. Year Luck retired. They were supposed to be good, the Colts were. 2020, yes, the Colts were a playoff team, and Indiana was in the top 15 in the final CFP rankings that year. But with fans in attendance, I don't know. It's certainly, I guess it would have been a little bit when Terry Hepner was the head coach in Indiana. 2005, 2006. Of course, the Colts won the Super Bowl in the 2006 season. Outside of that, I'm only 21, so maybe there was a time long ago. I mean, the Colts haven't even been in Indy for that long, relatively speaking. Shout out Mayflower Trucks, middle of the night. Baltimore folks know the story. That's a dangerous game. You're talking about now a really good time for sports in the state of Indiana. Because you got IU football. You got the Colts, which, okay, Daniel Jones, sure, he's the answer. And then you got the Pacers coming off an NBA Finals appearance, and I miss Tyrese Halliburton. I hope that he is able to get back to the same level he was before his Achilles injury. But the Pacers, the Fever just upset the Atlanta Dream in the first round of the WNBA playoffs. Nobody expected that. It happened anyway. I mean, man, Indiana basketball, we don't know. But if Indiana basketball is good, dude, wow. And that's not bad. That's not bad at all. Colts Titans, 1 o'clock. Matt Taylor, Rick Venturi have you covered right here on WGCL. Pre-game coverage beginning at noon as the Colts head to Nashville to take on this year's number 1 overall pick, Cam Ward, and the Tennessee Titans. I have not watched a down of Colts football this year. I don't know if that should change. I might be a little superstitious and say that, well, Colts are doing great. They're 2-0. Thank you, leverage, and Spencer Schrader's right leg from 45 yards. Sorry, Bo Nix, you 26-year-old second-year NFL quarterback. I think maybe I'll stick to the superstition and not watch the Colts. Or if I do watch them and they lose, it's my fault. Tell you what, though. Next Sunday, we'll be here talking IU football. Whatever happens after Iowa, my fellow student media members and I, we are going to day trip that. So we're going to drive to Iowa, cover the game, and then drive back. We'll get back to Bloomington probably about 4 in the morning. I'll sleep for about as long as I slept last night. I'll sleep for 2 or 3 hours because I was up editing my package, going through all the video, and there are some really, really good shots that I was able to get. I think I showed up on the NBC broadcast a few times. Look for photo vest number 15. But an exciting time in the Hoosier State, and that's what it is. It's the Hoosier State. Tell you what, I'd love an IU rematch with Notre Dame. I would. I think this year's Indiana could give them a decent fight. I don't know if they'd win, but they could give them a decent fight for sure. Indiana football should be a top 10 team by the time the AP poll comes out, and anything less than that is highway robbery. Thank you so much for listening to IU Sports Sunday. Indiana beating Illinois 63-10. We had plenty to talk about. Hopefully, we get to talk about Indiana football being 5-0 next week after the Hoosiers make their first road trip of the season. But until then, have a good rest of your Sunday afternoon. Hopefully, the Colts are 3-0 in 12 hours. You've been listening to IU Sports Sunday.